welcome to The Grill, a new series from Saurav Insight. For most of my life, the current decided where I went. I worked hard, but I wasn't the one steering. The series is about learning to steer. I am Saurabh Sharma, an immigrant, a father, and a digital specialist figuring out West London. I haven't figured it all out yet. I'm just a guy in his 40s trying to build. You're hearing my real voice right now, but for the main episode, I use an AI. I'd rather use the technology I have to seep honest thought today than wait for the perfect studio or the perfect moment. This is The Grill. Welcome to the construction site.
Last time I talked about connecting the dots, going back through the whole life, writing it all down, and finding a pattern that had been there all along. Today, what I did with that pattern, how I stopped looking backwards and started looking forward, not with a 5-year plan, with something more honest than that. For years I could see the bigger picture. I knew what Nepal needed. I knew what the youth needed. I knew what kind of world I wanted to help build. The vision was clear. The problem was, I couldn't hold it alone. I needed someone else to carry the macro while I worked the ground. When that person was there, I moved. When they weren't, I drifted. The frustration I carried for years wasn't failure, it was misalignment. What I was missing wasn't ambition, it was internal architecture. There was a period before the fog when things felt genuinely alive. The think tanks, real research, rooms where serious people were trying to seriously change the country. Those years had energy, real energy. I was present for them, not just physically, but mentally. I didn't know then that it was the last period for a while where I would feel fully there. And then the shift came, quietly. Without a single moment I could point to, the fog arrived. But here is what made those years so disorienting. Life didn't slow down. If anything, it accelerated. From the outside, those were some of my most visible years. From the inside, I was barely there. I was a lead percussionist on a musical caravan travelling across the country. I facilitated workshops in 5 districts for a UN programme. I pitched a resort concept on national television. I was doing real things, meaningful things. But when difficulty arrived, and it always arrives, I drifted. Not because the work wasn't worth staying for, because I hadn't yet built the internal structure to hold my position when the current pulled. The fog is not emptiness. That is the part people misunderstand. The fog is fullness without presence. You move, you show up, you perform. You even produce real things, but you are not steering any of it. I thought I was missing opportunities. Looking back, I was missing myself. Those were not wasted years. The workshops were real. The music was real. The connections were real. They were good bricks. But bricks need an architect before they become a building, and I was not yet my own architect. That's when something shifted. Not immediately, not dramatically. But the conditions finally changed. I arrived in London in January 2023 with 2 red suitcases and no guarantee of anything. I started an MSc in digital marketing, and almost simultaneously, generative AI became publicly available. Those 2 things arrived together, and together they changed something fundamental. The MSc gave me the academic framework to understand what I had already been living. The attention economy, algorithmic behaviour, digital identity. I wasn't learning new things, I was finding the language and the evidence for things I had experienced across 2 decades. The degree didn't teach me the insight. It made the insight credible and transferable. And the AI gave me something I had never had before, a thinking partner that asked better questions than I could ask myself. Not a person whose current I could drift into, not a magnetic figure whose vision I could borrow. Just a tool, patient, structureless, without agenda. For the first time, I didn't need someone else to hold the macro. I could hold it myself. But this created a new question. Hold what, exactly? The thing I had always seen as a weakness, my inability to stay in one lane, my restlessness across music and politics and digital and psychology and nature and storytelling, was not a weakness at all. It was the speciality. I am not an expert in one discipline. I am someone who moves between disciplines and finds what connects them. Music and politics, digital behaviour and human psychology, immigrant experience and attention economics. the micro detail of a personal story and the macro reality of a generation's struggle. That is what Saurav Insight is, a connecting platform. The front yard discussion, where the newspaper, the tea, the nature and the ideas all exist in the same space at the same time. And that's where the work became specific. I started with myself. I audited my own digital inputs. Years of doom-scrolling Nepali politics. Outrage cycles that had nothing to do with my life in West London. Emotional spikes about events I couldn't influence from thousands of miles away. I was not informed. I was hijacked. Then I tried it with my wife. She wanted to improve her English, so I curated her feeds. Vocabulary influencers, learning groups, educational content. A week later I checked her phone, not a single English verb in sight, just an endless masterclass in mutton curry. The algorithm had replaced my curation with exactly what it had learned she actually craved. Comfort, familiarity, home in a screen. I laughed. And then I unlocked my own phone and saw the same thing, wearing different clothes. That experiment became a Substack post, then another, then a framework. Then, earlier this year, Deciblitz, one of the UK's largest South Asian publications, reached out to interview me about the immigrant time tax and digital exhaustion in the diaspora. That was the first time the work reflected back at me from outside. A few years ago, I was deep in the fog, clouded, drifting, unable to hold anything for long. Now I am raising my daughter with my wife in West London, working full-time, building a company, developing a product, running a regular podcast, supporting local charities, researching the algorithm audit, approaching prospective clients. Someone wanted my perspective on digital well-being for the South Asian community in the UK. I sat with that for a moment, not with pride, just with quiet recognition that the direction had finally become clear. The future I was seeking had been in the work all along. I just had to keep building long enough to see it. The algorithm audit is still evolving. But it is already working. I want to be honest about something. The ground beneath this project is not fully solid. The future is not guaranteed. Visa, immigration. But I have learned something about building on uncertain ground. You build things that belong to you regardless of where you end up. The front yard is not a location. It is a practice. I stopped waiting for the ground to become solid. I started building things that don't need it to be. Recently, someone I respect pushed back on something I said. He said, "That's Saurav Insight, but this is mine," and gave me his perspective. I loved that moment because it told me exactly what the front yard is supposed to be. Not a broadcast, an exchange. My grandfather sat in the front yard with a newspaper. My grandmother served tea to whoever came. Everyone contributed. That was how I was formed, not by one person's insight, but by the collision of many. But I also remember what the old front yard couldn't do. The question that seemed irrelevant. The idea that didn't fit the mainstream conversation. The child told, "Not now, this doesn't belong here." Those were pushed aside. And with them, sometimes, the most important thing in the room. Saurav Insight is built on a different principle. The idea that sounds out of place, that is exactly where innovation hides. The perspective that challenges the consensus, that is where growth happens. The unconventional question, that is where people get the chance to correct, to expand, to see something they couldn't see before. The front yard taught me the value of gathering. Saurav Insight is trying to get the rest of it right. The future I was seeking was never a destination. It was a direction. And the direction has always been the same, towards the front yard, wherever it is, in whatever form it takes. When I think honestly about the complete picture, it is not just the front yard with the newspaper and the tea and the discussion. It is also the garden, the living, growing things, the homemade wine, a muddle of fresh mint for a mojito in summer. I don't have that yet. Not fully, not here, but something has shifted. Even in the small version of it, I do have. The presence makes it fuller than the abundance ever did. All of this, the MSc, the AI, the audit, the front yard, the garden, is just me building what I didn't have before, internal architecture. Not just to understand the world, but to hold a vision inside it without needing someone else to carry it for me. Because that was the real problem. Not lack of ideas, not lack of opportunity, the inability to hold the future without borrowing it from someone else. For the first time, that has changed. I'm not chasing the future anymore. I'm building it from the inside out. Next time, building the self, the unglamorous, practical, daily work of becoming. 2 recoveries, 2 countries, the same person, brewing slowly both times. I'm Saurav, this is The Drill. I'll see you next episode.